The Beaumont Children, Real Story. Have you ever felt the chilling emptiness of waiting for someone who never returns? The Beaumont children left their Adelaide home on a sunny Australia day in 1966, heading joyfully to Glenelg Beach, a journey they had made many times before. Jane, 9, was responsible and mature for her age, entrusted by her parents to watch over her younger siblings, 7-year-old Arnna and 4-year-old Grant. It was a simpler time, when children playing alone at the beach seemed perfectly normal, perfectly safe. But what began as an innocent adventure soon spiraled into one of Australia's most haunting mysteries. They boarded the bus to Glenelg, waved goodbye, and smiled, promising to return home before lunchtime. The clock ticked. Hours passed. Lunch turned to panic. Panic turned into terror. They never came home. Their disappearance wasn't merely another missing persons report. It tore through the heart of a nation, shaking its people to their core. Thousands of volunteers searched tirelessly. Police combed beaches, fields, and forests, chasing shadows. Every clue was a dead end. Every lead vanished into thin air. Today, decades later, the Beaumont children remain ghostly figures, faces frozen in photographs, innocence lost to time, forever young and forever unanswered. But their story continues to haunt Australia and the world, whispering a warning that echoes through every parent's heart. Do you really know who's watching your children? Join us as we delve deep into the chilling, real story of the Beaumont children. A story not only about loss, but about unanswered questions, eerie coincidences, unsettling theories, and the haunting possibility that the truth was closer and far darker than anyone imagined. Chapter 1. A Day Like Any Other. January 26, 1966 began like any other bright, warm summer day in Adelaide, South Australia. The city awoke to clear skies, the gentle hum of morning traffic, and children excitedly preparing for Australia Day celebrations. Among them were the Beaumont children, Jane, Arnna, and Grant, whose laughter filled their small suburban home in Somerton Park. Nancy Beaumont, their mother, carefully packed a small bag for their beach adventure, making sure Jane had enough change for ice cream and bus fare. Their father, Jim Beaumont, had already left for work, unaware it was the last time he would ever see his children's smiling faces. "Be back by noon," Nancy called after them, as the trio waved and rushed out the door. Jane, responsible and protective, confidently led her younger siblings to the bus stop. It was a route they'd taken countless times, the neighborhood filled with friendly, familiar faces. At approximately 10:10 a.m., the Beaumont children boarded the bus to Glenelg Beach, excitedly anticipating a day of swimming, sandcastles, and ice cream. Witnesses remembered their bright smiles, the infectious joy that surrounded the three siblings. Nothing seemed unusual. Nothing seemed wrong. Arriving at Glenelg Beach, the children quickly joined hundreds of others enjoying the holiday atmosphere. The beach bustled with activity, families picnicking, teenagers splashing in the surf, ice cream vendors calling out to the eager crowd. Jane spread out their towels on the sand, carefully applying sunscreen to Arnna and Grant, ensuring her younger siblings were safe and comfortable. Witnesses would later recall the siblings playing happily near the water. Grant, energetic and playful, ran along the shore, chased by Arnna, whose cheerful laughter carried with the sea breeze. Jane sat close by, watching protectively, occasionally smiling and waving to familiar faces. But as noon approached, something changed. A local woman enjoying her morning at the beach noticed the children speaking to a tall, blonde-haired man. At first glance, it appeared harmless. The children seemed relaxed, laughing, and comfortable around this stranger. But something about this man, his posture, his confident demeanor, his easy charm, would later haunt this witness. Others soon noticed the same man engaging closely with the Beaumont children, even joining them in playful games on the sand. To all appearances, he seemed friendly, harmless, just another adult enjoying a day at the beach. At around 11:45 a.m., a store attendant nearby distinctly recalled Jane buying pastries and snacks using a £1 note, a curious detail since Nancy Beaumont had only given Jane a small amount of change. The children appeared cheerful and entirely unbothered, and yet Jane's relaxed demeanor stood out, too relaxed for a child usually cautious around strangers. As noon came and went, Nancy began pacing anxiously at home. By 1 p.m., her anxiety turned into alarm. She felt a deep, maternal instinct that something had gone terribly wrong. Unable to bear the silence any longer, she hurriedly made her way to the bus stop, expecting to see her children stepping down the bus steps, smiling and apologetic for losing track of time. But the bus arrived without them. Nancy's heart sank, her blood ran cold, and the cheerful sunlight suddenly felt ominously dark. It was at that precise moment, standing there alone, staring desperately at the empty seats of the departing bus, that Nancy Beaumont knew something had gone horribly, irreversibly wrong. Meanwhile, back at Glenelg Beach, the warm sand bore the last footprints of 3 innocent children. Prints slowly erased by the encroaching waves, the tide carrying away the day's secrets, forever burying the answers beneath the unfeeling ocean waters. Their laughter, their innocence, and their very presence on that busy, sunny beach vanished without a single trace, leaving only the haunting echo of unanswered questions behind. Chapter 2, Lost Hours. It began with confusion, then came disbelief, and finally, sheer panic. By early afternoon on that Australia day, Nancy Beaumont paced restlessly through her home, eyes darting repeatedly toward the clock. Each passing minute stretched longer and felt heavier. The children's playful voices, usually echoing around the house, had fallen hauntingly silent. Unable to shake the rising dread, Nancy called Jim at work, her voice trembling with fear. "The children aren't back yet," she whispered, trying to steady her voice. At first, Jim Beaumont felt certain it was nothing serious. "They probably just lost track of time, Nance," he reassured gently. Yet beneath his calm tone, anxiety began, gnawing at the edges of his thoughts. When Jim arrived home, he found Nancy standing on their porch, staring anxiously down the empty street. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with barely contained panic. Without hesitation, Jim drove swiftly to Glenelg Beach, hoping to spot the familiar faces of his children waiting near the bus stop or wandering along the sand. But as he moved through the crowd, a sinking feeling deepened. His children weren't there. No Jane, no Arnna, no Grant. Only the carefree chatter and laughter of strangers, oblivious to the growing storm inside his heart. Meanwhile, Nancy frantically began contacting neighbors, friends, and anyone she thought might have seen the children. Each call ended the same way: sympathy, confusion, and helplessness. Nobody had answers. Nobody had seen the Beaumont children since that morning. Hours melted into an agonizing blur. As twilight approached, Jim and Nancy Beaumont could no longer deny their worst fears. With dread gripping their hearts, they finally reported their children missing to the local police. The Glenelg police station sprang into immediate action, understanding the urgency of 3 young children missing for several hours. Officers swiftly retraced the children's steps, methodically interviewing beachgoers, shopkeepers, and bus drivers. Slowly, a picture emerged, a deeply unsettling one. Multiple witnesses described seeing the children playing with a tall, blonde-haired man. The stranger seemed friendly and approachable, comfortable in his interactions, as though he already knew the children. But there was something off, something disturbingly calculated in his presence. Each witness echoed the same impression. The children seemed utterly at ease with this man, almost too trusting for three young siblings usually cautious around strangers. One witness, an elderly woman, distinctly remembered Jane speaking politely with the man, acting as though he was someone familiar, someone trustworthy. She recalled the stranger confidently helping the children dress after swimming, assisting them as naturally as a parent or close family friend would. The police meticulously pieced together the timeline of events, yet each puzzle piece brought more confusion and dread. The store assistant, who had seen Jane spending money on pastries, confirmed once again the bizarre detail. The children had paid with a £1 note, despite Nancy Beaumont clearly stating she had only given Jane a handful of coins. This revelation struck investigators as profoundly disturbing. It suggested someone else had provided the children with money, someone who had gained their trust, someone manipulating them carefully, deliberately, and frighteningly well. Back at their home, Jim and Nancy paced restlessly, helplessly waiting for any sign, any glimmer of hope. Their phone rang constantly, each call raising a desperate, painful hope, only to dash it against the harsh reality. Rumors began to swirl through their small community, whispers quickly turning into frantic speculations. As night enveloped Adelaide, the Beaumont home descended into silence, an empty silence that seemed to mock the once lively household. Nancy clutched her children's favorite toys, desperate to feel connected to them, desperate to find solace in their memory. In their bedrooms, beds lay neatly made, toys arranged carefully, awaiting occupants who would never again tuck themselves beneath the covers. Jane's diary, open to an unfinished page, spoke of plans for the future, hopes and dreams now suspended forever in uncertainty. Outside, darkness blanketed the city. Parents across Adelaide checked on their sleeping children, holding them tighter than usual, haunted by the knowledge that something unspeakable had touched their community, leaving scars that would never fully heal. As the hours ticked by without answers, a haunting truth settled over the Beaumont family, the police, and the city itself. This was no ordinary disappearance. This was a carefully orchestrated, sinister act. The lost hours between noon and evening held dark secrets, secrets that, even decades later, would continue to haunt every soul touched by the tragedy of the Beaumont children. Chapter 3: Shadows of Suspicion. In the days following the disappearance of the Beaumont children, Adelaide transformed into a city gripped by fear. The once friendly community now watched each other suspiciously, quietly wondering if the monster responsible for such a sinister act lived among them. Trust eroded quickly, replaced by wary glances and whispered accusations. Newspapers ran bold, alarming headlines, vividly capturing the collective dread of the nation. Families clung tighter to their children, streets emptied earlier, and playgrounds fell eerily silent. Glenelg Beach, previously a place of carefree joy, now stood as a dark reminder of vulnerability and innocence lost. Investigators frantically pursued leads, each trail igniting brief flickers of hope before extinguishing again into frustrating dead ends. The initial descriptions of the blonde-haired stranger from Glenelg Beach became the focal point of their inquiry. Sketches of the suspect circulated throughout Australia, plastered across newspapers, shop windows, and lampposts. Tip lines rang incessantly with sightings and claims, overwhelming the authorities with information. Police tirelessly sifted through countless reports, yet each clue unraveled under scrutiny. Every promising lead seemed cursed, dissolving into confusion or outright contradiction. One witness claimed to have seen the children accompanied by the stranger leaving Glenelg in a blue sedan. Another described them boarding a different bus entirely. Yet another swore he'd seen them still playing alone late into the afternoon. The confusion deepened, and authorities struggled to separate credible testimony from false memories and desperate imaginings. As the investigation intensified, attention shifted closer to home. In desperation, the police turned a critical eye toward Jim and Nancy Beaumont themselves, a heartbreaking and humiliating turn of events for grieving parents. The Beaumonts endured grueling interrogations, their private lives dissected, their parenting questioned. Their neighbors began whispering, wondering if perhaps there was something darker beneath the surface. For Jim and Nancy, this suspicion cut deeply, adding unbearable anguish to an already unimaginable ordeal. But exhaustive investigations quickly confirmed their innocence, leaving authorities and the community to face a harsher truth. A stranger, cunning and dangerous, had abducted the Beaumont children, someone who had effortlessly gained their trust and vanished without leaving any definitive trace. Theories swirled and multiplied. Psychics and clairvoyants offered their visions. Desperate families provided seemingly relevant but ultimately useless information, and journalists dug deep, exposing Adelaide's darker undercurrents. Panic and paranoia fueled false leads, complicating the search for genuine answers. Months passed, yet the police remained empty-handed, their frustration palpable. Adelaide, unable to move forward, lingered in the shadow of its worst fears. The children's school desks sat empty, each vacant seat a painful reminder of loss. Classmates struggled to understand why their friends had disappeared, their young minds grappling with concepts far beyond their comprehension. Despite the intense national scrutiny, the trail grew colder by the day, hope gradually giving way to despair. Slowly, the authorities began to accept the grim reality. Whoever had taken Jane, Arnna, and Grant Beaumont had likely succeeded in concealing their terrible deed completely. Yet, through all the darkness and suspicion, one haunting detail persisted: the stranger at Glenelg Beach. The meticulously constructed sketches of his face became infamous, etched permanently into Australia's collective memory. His image circulated endlessly, a phantom reminder of evil lurking unseen, unnoticed, perhaps still walking freely amongst them. Years would pass, memories would fade, witnesses would age, but the suspicion and fear would never truly leave Adelaide. It lingered, shadow-like, rooted in uncertainty, in the cruel, unanswered question that continued to torment. Who had stolen the Beaumont children? And, even more chillingly, was he still out there? Chapter 4. Echoes in the Dark. As months melted into years, the Beaumont children's disappearance slowly evolved from a frantic search into a lingering nightmare, a painful scar deeply etched into the heart of Australia. Time didn't heal, it merely smoothed the edges, dulling immediate pain, but never fully erasing the ache. Jim and Nancy Beaumont remained trapped in an agonizing limbo, caught between desperate hope and crushing despair. Every ring of the phone ignited a fragile spark of optimism. Every knock on the door brought a shiver of dread. Life had stopped for them on that sunny Australia day, and no amount of passing time seemed capable of easing their grief. Yet the nation, unwilling to forget, continuously resurrected the case. Periodically, tips surfaced, rekindling the flicker of hope only to fade into cruel disappointment once again. Leads emerged sporadically, each more bizarre and unsettling than the last, fueling speculation but rarely offering real answers. One such lead appeared in 1968, 2 years after the children's disappearance. Police received letters, purportedly, sent by the Beaumont children themselves. Written in childish handwriting, the notes pleaded desperately for help, claiming the siblings were being held captive by a mysterious figure. Authorities and forensic analysts pored over the letters, searching for hidden clues, any shred of authenticity. But ultimately, this too proved a cruel hoax, yet another false hope in an endless cycle of despair. Despite setbacks, detectives refused to abandon their search. Every scrap of evidence, however tenuous, was meticulously preserved and examined, and with each year that passed, new suspects emerged, shadows surfacing from the darker corners of society. One suspect in particular cast a chilling shadow: Harry Phipps, an influential Adelaide businessman whose name repeatedly surfaced decades after the children's disappearance. Witnesses recalled seeing a man fitting Phipps's description near Glenelg Beach that fateful day. Even more hauntingly, a private investigation decades later unearthed troubling accounts of Phipps's alleged sinister interests and suspicious behaviors. His luxurious home, just minutes away from the Beaumont residence, added further credibility to suspicions. Neighbors recalled strange noises emanating from the property around the time of the children's disappearance. Decades later, a backyard excavation conducted on Phipps' property yielded disturbing findings, anomalies that raised suspicions, though no definitive evidence of the Beaumont children emerged. Still, for many, Phipps represented a terrifying possibility, an embodiment of hidden evil lurking quietly behind a respectable facade. He became symbolic of the darkness that could exist in plain sight, a horrifying reminder that monsters could walk unnoticed among friends and neighbors. Throughout the years, psychics and mediums also gravitated toward the tragedy, claiming visions of hidden graves and dark chambers. Investigators, desperate for leads, reluctantly followed these bizarre suggestions, only to be met with disappointment each time. Yet, even amid constant frustration, the Beaumont children's tragedy spurred important changes. Australia grew more vigilant, more cautious. Children no longer roamed unsupervised. Stranger danger warnings became ingrained in public consciousness. The Beaumont tragedy marked a painful turning point, robbing a generation of innocence and forever altering the nation's psyche. Decades marched forward relentlessly, slowly transforming the Beaumont case from active investigation into historic mystery. The children's rooms, untouched and preserved, stood as silent memorials to lives interrupted, innocence destroyed, and dreams forever lost. Friends of the family moved on, the neighborhood changed, and yet Jim and Nancy Beaumont remained fixed, immovable, trapped in the cruel echoes of that January morning. With each passing year, the details blurred slightly. Witnesses grew uncertain, memories faded, but the central haunting question remained. Where were Jane, Arnna, and Grant Beaumont? Had they died quickly, mercifully unaware? Or had their final moments stretched into unimaginable horrors? The weight of that question lingered over Adelaide, over Australia, like an ever-present shadow, dark, relentless, and deeply unsettling. Chapter 5. Hidden Truths and Silent Graves. Over the following decades, the Beaumont children's case settled into the eerie stillness of unsolved mysteries. Yet the story was far from over. Every few years, whispers reignited the search, shining brief, hopeful lights into dark corners, only to fade once again into despair. As the 1980s gave way to the 90s, new technology and forensic techniques provided investigators with renewed optimism. Detectives reopened the dusty case files, meticulously poring over old evidence, hoping modern science could uncover secrets previously missed. One lead took them to a construction site near Glenelg. Workers reported discovering small, bone-like fragments buried beneath layers of earth. Investigators descended on the site, carefully excavating every inch. But after days of painstaking work, forensic analysis dashed hopes yet again. The bones were animal, not human. In another desperate attempt, attention turned to Edward Bevan Spencer von Einem, a known predator responsible for horrifying crimes against young people in the region. His arrest in the early 80s sent shockwaves across Adelaide, revealing a terrifying underground of violence and exploitation. Police meticulously reviewed his movements and alibis, hoping for a connection. However, despite exhaustive investigations, von Einem's connection to the Beaumont children remained speculative. Still, many remained convinced he knew something, hiding behind a veil of chilling silence. Further whispers implicated notorious child predator Bevan Spencer von Einem and the infamous family, a secretive group suspected of unspeakable acts. These chilling leads, terrifying in their implications, pointed to a darker, more organized underbelly of Australian society. Authorities pressed deeper, driven by a sense of urgency and dread, but still failed to uncover tangible proof. Frustration turned to desperation. In 1996, 30 years after the children vanished, authorities received another anonymous tip. A witness claiming the children had been buried beneath a warehouse floor near Adelaide. Police excavated extensively, hopes surging once again. But, as before, the search yielded nothing but disappointment and unanswered questions. Every failure compounded public frustration, pain, and disbelief. The Beaumont children's disappearance, an unhealed wound in the national psyche, continued to haunt Australia, symbolizing every parent's darkest fears. Their smiling faces remained frozen in old photographs, their innocence preserved forever, in a cruel irony of time. In the silence left behind, Jim and Nancy Beaumont lived quiet, broken lives. The weight of unanswered questions bore heavily upon them, shaping every day, every conversation, every quiet moment alone. The couple aged quickly, shadows permanently etched into their features. The grief never softened, it merely became familiar, a constant, unending companion. Throughout the early 2000s, efforts to solve the mystery persisted. Police employed advanced age-progressing technology, creating images of how Jane, Arnna, and Grant might appear decades later, still clinging to the slim chance that someone, somewhere, might recognize their adult faces. Public interest surged, once again fueled by television specials, documentaries, and investigative reports exploring new angles and theories. Theories emerged claiming the children had been trafficked abroad, hidden in rural properties, or kept imprisoned by unknown abductors for sinister purposes. Each story was compelling, hauntingly plausible, and terrifyingly imaginable, but none brought resolution. Perhaps the cruelest moment came in 2018, when investigators, acting on a detailed tip, returned to the grounds of Harry Phipps's former home. A new excavation was launched, digging beneath the earth once again, searching desperately for human remains. For a moment, Australia collectively held its breath, the promise of truth tantalizingly close. But in a bitter echo of past disappointments, no remains were found. The silence returned, heavier and deeper than before. Each failure felt like losing the children all over again, reopening wounds that never healed. Yet despite endless disappointments, the Australian public, police, and the Beaumont family clung stubbornly to hope, refusing to accept the bitter possibility that the truth might never be known. Quietly, privately, many feared the children had been lost forever, hidden truths buried in silent graves, never to be uncovered. Chapter 6. A Nation Forever Changed. The Beaumont children's disappearance became more than a tragic mystery. It altered Australia profoundly. Long after the immediate shock faded, their story continued to resonate, reshaping cultural norms, community practices, and national consciousness in ways previously unimaginable. Before 1966, Australian society exuded an innocence, a comfortable trust that children were safe exploring alone, secure within their communities. But after the Beaumont children vanished, innocence evaporated abruptly. Doors once left unlocked at night began bolting tight. Streets and playgrounds previously buzzing with the laughter of children grew quieter, emptier, haunted by newfound suspicion and caution. stranger danger quickly entered everyday language. Teachers drilled safety warnings into students, emphasizing vigilance, caution, and mistrust of unknown adults. Parents hovered more protectively, their watchful eyes never fully relaxing, haunted by the specter of Jane, Arnna, and Grant, children who, decades earlier, had simply trusted too much. Community policing intensified dramatically. Authorities began keeping detailed records of known offenders, closely monitoring their movements. The landscape of childhood changed, replaced by careful watchfulness and whispered warnings, a constant quiet fear underlying ordinary life. Yet despite these transformations, a sense of collective guilt lingered. Australia, as a nation, grappled with uncomfortable self-reflection. How could such a thing happen here? How had a predator so easily infiltrated the comforting safety of suburban normality, disappearing without a trace? Every subsequent missing child case reignited painful memories, pulling Australia back into the Beaumont tragedy's shadow. Parents watched the news reports with a familiar, chilling dread, silently praying for a different outcome. But beneath this painful legacy emerged a determination for change. Law enforcement modernized rapidly, creating specialized missing persons units and introducing advanced forensic techniques and psychological profiling. Public campaigns raised awareness about child safety, fundamentally altering Australia's approach to child protection. These reforms, born from unspeakable tragedy, undoubtedly saved countless other children, their safety a direct tribute to the 3 innocent siblings lost forever. Yet for Jim and Nancy Beaumont, there was no solace in progress. Their pain remained deeply personal, a wound that refused to heal. Their family home, once filled with life and laughter, became a quiet monument to sorrow and absence. Eventually, unable to endure the reminders, they moved away from Somerton Park, seeking escape from constant, painful memories. Over time, the media gradually moved on, the Beaumont children's disappearance shifting slowly into history. Yet the case never truly faded. Each generation rediscovered the haunting mystery, captivated anew by its chilling implications and unresolved nature. Documentaries, books, and articles revisited the case frequently, sparking fresh waves of speculation and interest. Experts debated endlessly, poring over faded photographs, shaky testimonies, and cryptic clues, hoping to solve a puzzle that had defied resolution for decades. In 2019, authorities finally acknowledged publicly what had been privately feared for years, that solving the Beaumont children's disappearance might now be impossible. Decades of failed searches and cold trails offered little hope. Witnesses had aged or passed away, evidence had deteriorated, and time had cruelly erased too many details. Still, Australians refused to forget. Memorials were quietly established, and communities continued to honor the lost children, keeping their memory alive, vowing never to abandon them completely. The Beaumont siblings had become part of Australia's collective soul, symbols of innocence stolen, of dangers lurking unseen, and of a nation forever changed. Though their fate remained tragically uncertain, the Beaumont children's legacy endured. Clearly, a cautionary tale etched deeply into the national psyche. Australia might never have answers, but it would never again be caught unaware. Vigilance became permanent, distrust became instinctive, and the simple joy of childhood freedom became a bittersweet memory of the past. In losing the Beaumont children, Australia gained a painful wisdom, forever changing the nation's heart, its communities, and its very way of life. Chapter 7. Ghosts of Glenelg. Though decades passed, Glenelg Beach never truly escaped the shadow cast by the Beaumont children's disappearance. What had once been Adelaide's idyllic seaside playground became something darker, a place forever, tinged with melancholy, suspicion, and unanswered whispers carried by the sea breeze. Visitors to Glenelg often felt a strange heaviness, an unspoken sadness drifting just beneath the bright sun and laughter. Even those unfamiliar with the tragedy sensed something amiss, their smiles tempered by a lingering unease they couldn't fully explain. For locals who remembered that Australia Day of 1966, the beach remained a solemn reminder of innocence lost. Elderly residents sometimes gazed out over the sand, quietly recalling happier days when children's voices filled the air without caution or fear. Stories soon emerged, quiet tales shared in low, reverent tones of eerie sightings, spectral figures glimpsed briefly at twilight near the shoreline. Some claimed they'd seen ghostly children playing silently at dusk, vanishing as abruptly as they appeared. Such stories, though impossible to verify, quickly became part of local legend, quietly embraced by a community still struggling to make sense of its profound loss. But the real ghosts haunting Glenelg Beach were not supernatural. They were memories, grief, and regret. Each sunset reminded Adelaide of unanswered questions, lost opportunities, and a truth forever out of reach. Some locals avoided the area altogether, burdened by painful recollections of searches that ended in tears, unanswered pleas, and frustrated hope. In the years that followed, many people continued bringing flowers to a small memorial quietly erected near the shore. This humble monument became a sacred space, symbolizing not only the Beaumont children but all children taken too soon, victims whose stories echoed in Australia's heartache. Visitors often paused there, silently reflecting, paying respects to Jane, Arnna, and Grant, children they'd never met, but felt deeply connected to nonetheless. Their young, hopeful faces gazed out from photographs, frozen forever in youthful innocence, reminding passers-by of life's fragility and the darkness that sometimes hides beneath bright smiles and sunny days. Amid this ongoing sadness, the Beaumont family's agony endured quietly, privately. Nancy and Jim gradually withdrew from public view, shielded by friends and family who protected their privacy fiercely. Their sorrow remained profoundly personal, impossible for outsiders to fully comprehend, even as new generations grew up unaware of the detailed circumstances surrounding the case. The Beaumont children's disappearance became embedded in local culture, Adelaide's own painful folklore. Schools used the tragedy to teach vigilance and safety, hoping that such a loss might never happen again. Yet the unsettling reality persisted. Whoever took the Beaumont children had walked free, escaping justice, possibly still alive somewhere, their terrible secret guarded by silence and time. This horrifying truth cast its own long shadow, a chilling reminder of unresolved evil, leaving the community perpetually uneasy, forever watchful. And so, Glenelg Beach stood as an eerie monument, not only to 3 lost children but also to Australia's collective trauma. The sands remained inviting, the waves continued gently washing ashore. But beneath the peaceful surface lay the hidden echoes of January 26, 1966, a day etched permanently into memory, forever remembered, forever mourned. The haunting question lingered endlessly: would the ghosts of Glenelg ever rest? Or were they doomed, like Adelaide itself, to remain suspended forever in uncertainty, waiting patiently for truths that might never come? Chapter 8. Forever Waiting. Time, relentless and indifferent, marched onward. Decades faded into one another. Yet for Jim and Nancy Beaumont, the clock had stopped forever at midday on January 26, 1966. For them, life moved forward slowly, painfully, each day an echo of the last, each night haunted by dreams of laughter that would never be heard again. The mystery surrounding the Beaumont children's disappearance gradually shifted from immediate tragedy into a heartbreaking legend, a grim cautionary tale told and retold through generations. New leads occasionally emerged, promising resolution, only to fade quietly, unresolved. Authorities continued to receive sporadic tips, compelling detectives to reopen files, revisit old sites, and interview aging witnesses. Each new effort briefly reignited hope, reminding the Beaumonts and all of Australia that despite time's passing, their children had never been forgotten. As Jim and Nancy grew older, the grief they carried never faded. It merely changed, quieting into a solemn sadness that accompanied them every waking moment. In private moments, they wondered endlessly about the lives their children might have lived. What kind of adults Jane, Arnna, and Grant might have become, what dreams they might have fulfilled. Jim Beaumont passed away in 2004, carrying the unbearable pain of unanswered questions into eternal rest. Nancy, heartbroken and alone, continued quietly, sustained only by memories and photographs frozen forever in innocent smiles. Yet, Australia itself never entirely moved on. Each anniversary of the children's disappearance brought renewed attention, fresh media coverage, and public remembrance ceremonies. Even as witnesses grew scarce, evidence deteriorated, and memories faded, Australians stubbornly clung to hope. Hope that someday answers might finally emerge. Memorials and tributes continued, quietly affirming that the Beaumont children would always hold a special place in Australia's heart. Their disappearance became symbolic, representing every lost child, every parent's nightmare, every unanswered tragedy haunting society. In recent years, technological advancements and DNA testing offered new possibilities. Police maintained vigilance, prepared to pursue any credible lead. Yet every excavation and forensic examination ended in the same heartbreaking disappointment. Still, investigators refused to fully close the case, aware that the smallest fragment of evidence might someday surface, finally providing closure. In 2023, Nancy Beaumont passed away, never knowing her children's fate, never receiving answers to her life's deepest questions. Her passing symbolized a painful end. Both parents now gone, their hope carried beyond mortal reach, leaving behind a nation that continued to remember, to mourn, and to wonder. Today, more than half a century after the Beaumont children vanished, their absence remains as poignant and mysterious as ever. Australians continue quietly waiting, haunted by an unspoken but ever-present truth. Some questions may never be answered, some wounds never fully heal, yet through relentless hope, communities kept their memories alive, refusing to forget the children lost on that sunny Australia day. Glenelg Beach still echoes quietly with their laughter, a gentle reminder that innocence, once lost, can never truly vanish completely. For Jane, Arnna, and Grant Beaumont, whose childhood was stolen, whose future remains forever uncertain, the world continues its vigil, a nation forever waiting, hoping and silently mourning 3 innocent lives tragically interrupted. Their story, though deeply painful, endures powerfully, reminding us all of life's fragility, of love's strength, and of hope's stubborn, unyielding persistence in the face of unspeakable loss. Thank you for joining us on this haunting journey into the chilling and heartbreaking real story of the Beaumont children. Their disappearance is more than just a mystery. It's a powerful reminder of the vulnerabilities that lie beneath the surface of our everyday lives. If you were moved, intrigued, or touched by this story, please take a moment to like, subscribe, and share this video. Your support helps us continue uncovering and retelling the world's most unforgettable true stories, ensuring they are never forgotten. Together, let's keep the memories of Jane, Arnna, and Grant Beaumont alive, and hold tight to the hope that someday, somehow, their story will finally be resolved. Until then, stay vigilant, stay safe, and we'll see you again soon, right here, with another powerful real story.